Welcome to the third part of this first session on 2D drawing within Rhino. This session will be focusing on the production of layout pages within Rhino and setting these up for printing your drawings. We'll be looking at how to set up to-scale drawings on particular page sizes of your choosing, how to set line weights and line colour, and also how to add hatches onto your drawing and to set the weight of these hatches. I'll be using the example I was working on in the previous part of this session, and you can see I've kind of added a bit more detail into this plan with the addition of extra partitions on the walls and the detail added there. I've added in the windows using the block method we covered in the last session, and I've also added in a bit more detail onto this external walkway that you can see in the reference drawing here. I will be probably not using the reference as much now because I've kind of got all the elements drawn in for this basis of the plan. So I'm just going to keep that hidden for the time being. So we're going to start this session by setting up a basic A3 layout page. And layout pages in Rhino are found down here just on this little plus tab at the bottom left hand corner of your page. Usually you'll have a window for each of your different views you've set up in Rhino, and these kind of correspond to these four windows you start with in your views. So this plus icon here, if we click on it, we can either sort of split our viewports as such, or we can create a new layout, which is what we're going to be looking at today. So if we just select new layout here, it will ask us for a size, and this size will be the kind of page size we're printing at. So for this drawing I'm going to set up an A3 portrait page, which I'm going to set my drawing up as. For the printer, you will never print directly from Rhino to a printer as such, but you'll be printing to PDF, which will basically mean you're exporting the line drawing as a PDF, and then you would always print from Acrobat Reader, your standard kind of PDF reader on your computer. So we're going to keep the printer set as Rhino PDF there, and we're just going to call this plan drawing for now. For the initial detail count, we'll keep this as 1, and I'll kind of go into more detail about what these are as we go forward. So if you just hit OK, you'll then see it's opened up a new window here, and it's called Plan, which is the name of my layout view. And if we wanted to go back to drawing on our model, we could then just go back to the top window there, and you see it kind of opens this back up again. So this is how we navigate between our layouts and our model view. So the difference between them is your layout pages will be set at a particular page size, which is kind of shown by this white box here, and it will have a frame, which is this frame here, which is called a detail view. And the detail view basically acts as a window into your Rhino model space. So if I double clicked within that window, you'll see it slightly goes greyed out, and we can zoom in and out much like we are working in our model. And that is basically what it is. It's a window in to that model view, and therefore we can kind of scroll it till it's around the right scale. We could pan it if it's a big drawing to sort of focus in on different parts. And that is essentially just looking back into this view here. I would never work on any drawing or any modelling in your layouts. You just wanted to use it to kind of frame your views. Any kind of modelling work you should be doing in your views here, in your model views. So if we wanted to set this at a particular size, what we can do is we can click on the frame here, go to the properties of that frame, and if you go to the detail properties on there, you'll see it has a scale value. So mine's currently at 1mm on page is about 40mm in the model. So say if we wanted it to be 1 to 100, we'd have 1mm on page is 100mm in the model, which is a little bit small for this view. So for this one, I'm going to set it at 1 to 50 there. And it might be that I'm just going to kind of pan that to be sort of centered. We can center it up more accurately as we go forward. So once you've set up that scale, it might be that you don't want to accidentally kind of zoom in and scale around within it, because as soon as you start zooming, that scale will be lost and you'll be on a different scale then. So what you might want to do is just lock that scale in. So what I usually do is I'll set the scale at 1 to 50 or whatever scale you want, and then click on this tab here just to lock that scale in place. And you'll see then when you try and zoom in and out, you won't be able to zoom in the model. That scale is locked. You can, it was kind of if you wanted to then sort of adjust it or zoom in and out, you'd have to unlock that scale back in the properties there, but I'm going to keep it locked for the time being. We're now going to be looking at setting up the line weights on this drawing. So the most important part about when you start to set up line weights in your layout view is what's called turning on the print display option. To do that, if you just type in print display in your command here, by default this is turned off, and what print display does is it shows the lines as they're going to be printed in your drawing. So this is really important for kind of checking line weights as you're working on them, and I usually have this turned on in my layout view. So if we just click the state from off to on there, you'll see now that my drawing is now changed with kind of different line weights added in. This is because I've already set up my line weights in my drawing on my layer. So you can see if I zoom in, we've got kind of a thicker line for our section here. Then for our kind of internal walls, we've got a different thickness, it's on a 0.5 there, and then ranging down to our thinner walls for our elevation. So let me just kind of open this out so you can see it a bit more clearly. There. Now there's kind of two options to pay attention to, or three options actually in this, are our line type, our print color, and our print width. So you can see for this section thick here, we have a black for a print color and a print width of 1. This is set in millimeters, so this is actually set at 1 millimeter, and I think for this particular drawing that might be a bit too thick, so I'm just going to take that down to 0.7. Our section mid is on a 0.5, so a slightly slimmer line there. Do that here. And then our section thin, I'm actually going to put at a 0.18 for now. Check that. So it's still a dark line, you can see there, but it's slightly thicker. Now for my elevation lines, I've actually started to make these a grey line, so you can kind of see the difference between them and the section lines, and I'm just going to adjust these slightly. You can see the elevation thin line here is still blue, so I'm going to just turn this grey by selecting the print colour, changing the colour to a dark grey for this, and I'm going to keep the print width as a 0.1 there. So you can see here that that's this kind of thin line there. For my annotation lines, they're still set as green at the moment, so I kind of just want to make those black, but I want to give it a dashed line instead of a continuous solid line. So to change the line type, all we have to do is in this line type column here, it's currently set to continuous, which means just a continuous straight line, and if we select that, we can change its line type to one of these options here. Now these are kind of the default options within Rhino, so if I sort of wanted it dashed, I could go there, but it might be that that dash is way too big for this particular line. I actually want it to be a lot smaller, so we might have to go and make a new line type for this specific line. So to do that, if we just go to File, Properties, and then in our document properties, if we select line types here, it will list the kind of different line types Rhino has already set up. If we then want to make a new line type, if we go to Add, we can make a new line type. I'm going to call this Annotation. And you can set the pattern of the line type here. So if I went on this hidden line, you see it's set as 2, 2. What that means is it's a 2mm dash and then a 2mm gap. So in order to define a line, you just have to specify the length of the dash and the length of the gap. So for this drawing, let's try a 1.5 dash, comma, 1.5 gap. And you can see there in my annotation that now that's updated to show that particular line type. You can also set the kind of what this number refers to. It could be inches or millimeters. As we're working in millimeters, you want to do all your patterns in millimeters as well, otherwise it gets quite confusing. So with that changed, we then go OK, and then back in my line type, I can select that new line type I've made, annotation, hit OK, and you'll see now that it's kind of updated that with a more accurate dash. and that's changed on my door swings as well. So you'll also see that we've got our guidelines still in here, and they're still in green. This is set as a hidden line type, and what that means is it's just a dash at the moment, but actually I want to make this completely invisible when I go to print my drawings, so I can't see it. To do that, we actually change that in the print width option. Currently it's set to default, which is just kind of a default thickness. We actually want that to have a thickness of 0 or no thickness, and to do that, if we just scroll to the bottom, there's this no print option here. Hit that and you'll see that in my print preview that's now disappeared. That means it's not going to print out when I go to print my drawing. See, that's kind of a lot cleaner now, and we've got our line weights set up. So this is a good series of line weights to have for a drawing at around this scale, 1 to 50 or maybe 1 to 100. So you might want to copy out these different line weights into your drawings as well, to copy these as a good base point. But I'd always recommend doing test prints of these and kind of checking how they're printing out. It might be that some lines are too thin and you can't quite see them, or some lines are too thick and they're overpowering others. The key principle you want to get is just to have a hierarchy between your lines, that you can show that some parts that are being cut are obviously kind of thicker and a different material to other elements. So it's just to show a bit of hierarchy between the two there. And you can kind of clearly see that in this drawing, where we've got a thicker sort of outer line here, and then slimmer sort of inner lines for this part's being cut, and then a thinner grey lines for elements that are not being cut in that way. So we're now going to look at adding in a hatch into our drawing to show sort of different floor types in a couple of these rooms. Now, hatches are usually created in the model view, so we're going to go back to our top view, open this up, and we're going to just add a hatch to this floor here in this room. To create a hatch, you first have to define the boundary of the hatch, and to do that we're going to be using our guide layers, because we don't actually want to print out a kind of border line for the hatch. We want it to be invisible, so we're going to use our guide layer to help us do that. So I'm just going to double click on the guide layer, select my polyline, and I'm just going to draw out the boundary of this hatch. And then select that line. So you can see there I've got a kind of rectangular boundary that that hatch will sit within. Then to create the hatch, we just type in hatch into our command, and by default that's just created a solid filled hatch within there. Now you'll see in the hatch options, Rhino has a kind of standard set of hatches. So for now I'm just going to select the grid hatch, and we're going to give it a scale of 100 for now. And you can see, because we're working in millimeters, the scale will be quite small, so maybe let's do it at 1000. Let's try 500, that looks quite good for now. And we can also, if we want, set the base of the hatch. So if I wanted the hatch to start perfectly in this corner, we can do that, so the tiles will then perfectly match that. And when you're happy, just hit OK there. If you then want to go back and change the scale or change the type of hatch, you can go back to Properties, select the hatch, and in the Properties you can change the hatch to a different type if you wanted to, or change the scale here as well. So you've got options to kind of adjust that after the fact. We're also going to change the layer of this hatch because it currently sits on our guide layer, and I'm just going to move it into the hatch layer I've created there. Properties, layer, hatch, like so. We can now check that this is working. If we go back to our layout view, you can now see that that's added the hatch, and we've got this kind of much thinner line weight for the hatch and a lighter colour as well, so you can see that that's a kind of material finish and it's not something that's being cut in the drawing. Now it might be that you want to have different hatches than the ones that are provided by Rhino. You'll see that in the hatch options, Rhino only has kind of 7 or 8 default hatches, but you can actually install lots of different hatches onto your computer if you wanted kind of more bespoke hatches or something a bit more unique. To do this, I usually use this website here, which is cadhatch.com, and I'll leave a link to this in the description as well. And this website provides lots of different hatch types you can download. If I just select, let's go for this stonework hatch pattern, we'll try one of these. If you select those, you'll see it will download as a PAT file, and any PAT, which is called like a pattern file there, you can download and install into Rhino. So with that downloaded, if I then wanted to install a new hatch, you'd have to go to File, Properties, go on to our hatches, just above line types there, and you can import a new hatch within this. So if I select Import, locate that file I just downloaded, this one here, select Open, it will then give you a little preview of the hatch you're about to import. I'm just going to hit OK, and you'll see there now it's added that hatch in to my library. So then if I hit OK and I go back, I can then select that hatch to use, and it might be that the scale of this is slightly different to the other scales. This one looks quite big, so I'm just going to change it a bit lower, down to 10. There we go. And now we've got a kind of rustic stone floor in this room instead. We can go back and check that in the plan as well. So that gives you kind of a lot of scope for different hatches and different types of hatches you can add into your drawing, and all of these will kind of add more detail in to the plan. So I'm actually just going to pause the video and add some hatches into each of these rooms. And I'm going to also add a hatch into the walls as well, so you can see that this is kind of a concrete wall that's being cut, and give a differentiation between the outside of the flat and the inside. So I'm just going to pause and just do exactly the same technique of bounding each room, adding a hatch into each of them just to add more detail into that drawing. So now I've added in different hatch types for each of these rooms, and you can see that on my layout view that we've got a kind of hatch for the outer part of the flat here. We've got the sort of timber floorboards in the lobbies, and then we've got like a tiled floor in these two rooms here. And adding hatches just really kind of helps to convey the material finishes of any kind of particular materials, things you're specifying for floors or other surfaces on your plans, and it's really good to start to use these and look at different ones you could use for different materials. It just adds that sort of next level of detail into your plan drawing. Now we're going to finish today's session by looking at annotations and different types of annotation styles that you can add to your plan drawings, and then we'll also be finishing off with creating title blocks and adding different types of things and elements onto those as well. So we're going to start with basic annotations. These can be found in the drafting tab at the top of your kind of tabs up here. If we select that, you'll see that it's got a whole load of different annotation tools you can use here. So we're going to start with the linear dimension, or just a dimension tool, and that's just simply a kind of tool for setting out dimensions of your drawing, and you'll see it kind of reads off whatever scale you're working in and can draw it out from there. Usually what I'll do is, because I'm drawing in the guide layer, that is actually showing up as hidden because it's a no print line. So I actually might make a new section of layers just called layout. And these will be particularly for different layers within my layout page, and we can then set their own kind of print color and line width as well on top of that. So maybe these will be quite thin sort of black lines, and we'll just call this dimensions, dims, for the time being. So we can set those out. So you'll notice when I start to draw out different dimensions that they'll have a kind of default width to them, and it might be that you want to change the font size of these or change the type of arrows you have. And what you can do to do that is you can use what is called annotation styles within Rhino to set these so they all match each other and have the same style throughout your documents. Now if I select this annotation here, you'll see its style in the properties section is set to default, and it has a height there and kind of different other features of that. So instead of changing the height in this section, we can actually just create a brand new style which we can then apply to all our dimensions and annotations in our document. So if I go to Edit Style, it will then open up our properties again, and we can then select our annotation styles. And if I just go to Annotation Styles, I can create a new style, and we'll just call this Style 1 for the time being. If we then select that and select it under our annotation styles here, we can then start to kind of adjust all the parameters for this particular annotation style. So that could be font we could set. I'm going to go with a Futura font for this particular example, but Helvetica is usually a good font to use if you're sort of stuck for fonts. We can select the height, and this height will be, this unit will correspond to the units we've set up in our file. So a height of 1 will be 1 millimeter, so that'd be quite small. So I'm going to set it at a kind of, let's say a 4 mil for now. A text gap, that's the kind of gap between the text and the line you're doing. So let's just put that as 0.5 for now. We've got different ways you can align your text on that. We've got dimension options and kind of how these view, and there's lots of different parameters and things you can change within the styles. We've got the types of arrows we have on our dimension lines, so let's do that as a kind of tick for now. Try a dot there, and you can change the size of those as well, so let's just change those to a 3 just to see what that does. And you can change the units, so it's really good to kind of look through all of these and play around with them according to what you want to show in your drawings and how you want to set that up. So when you're happy with that, you can click Apply and then OK. And when we select our dimension, we can then in the styles change it to our new style, Style 1, and you'll see now that its text has changed. We've got that kind of tick feature on the arrow. We can just go through and change all our dimensions to match that. It might be that it's a bit close and you might want to go back and edit that style so it's slightly set off that line a bit more. So to do that, you just go File, Properties, back to our annotation styles, and then you can change that text gap or any other features. There you go, so that's now spaced a bit more comfortably off that line. So then you can go around and you can add in dimensions, you could add labels to label certain bits, you could just add basic text for different rooms, so it could be that you have a kitchen here, I can just add that in. And I mean there's kind of lots of different annotation features you can play around with here, so I'd definitely have a go at sort of trying out each of these. And for annotations, you just want to make your drawing as legible as possible. So if it's room types, it's really good to kind of add the names of different room types. For entrances, you might add a kind of arrow showing how you access the property. This might sometimes just look like a basic arrow like this. And usually you'd have this kind of showing the entrance to each of the flats in your property. So you could have one here. I slightly rotated that off, right? So you could have one for this door, and then you might want one for the other flats as well. You might want to make those a bit smaller, but depending on kind of what you're doing with your drawing. I'm going to go around and just add in a few dimensions and annotations onto this drawing, just so you can get an example of sort of how much detail you might want to add to your annotations. So I'm going to pause the video, add in some extra annotations, and then we'll go back and kind of cover which ones I've added and why they're useful to have within your drawings. So there we've just added some basic annotations in for main rooms, highlighting external walkway to the outside of the flats, just labelling that these stairs go up to the flats above, and some kind of key dimensions on there. And it's sort of really up to you how many different annotations you want to add in. It's just to really sort of add to the legibility of your drawings and make them clear and readable, and to highlight any kind of specific design techniques or elements you've made and changes you've made to your plan. So that's where we're going to kind of end today's session. In the next session we're going to be looking at setting up title pages and how you might want to then add on to these layout pages and set them up to have a unique sort of title page style to each of your pages you add in turn. I just wanted to finish off the session to quickly show you how you'd go about printing a page once you've set it up. So if you're then happy with this particular layout, to print it you just right click on your layout page, go print, and we're going to print it directly to a PDF file. So the one thing you want to kind of look out for is in your destination, just make sure it's set to PDF here. Don't worry about these options here for now, and in output and scale we just want to make sure that it's scaled at 1:1, which is the 1:1 on the layout page, because we've already set the scale on the layout page. We want to print it at 1:1 because that's the scale we've already set from there. Once that's made sure you're selected, hit the print option and it will then ask you to save it as a PDF. Just going to save it here for now. When that's saved, you can then just go and find that file in my downloads, and you'll see that that is now saved as a PDF, and from there we can then go and print that page out at the kind of scale we want it printed. So yeah, that's all we're covering for today's session, and we'll be looking at covering title blocks and then the addition of CAD blocks as well, and adding extra elements for animation into our plans to really kind of build them up and add a bit more character and add that sort of next level of storytelling into our plan drawings.